My name is Cynthia Peterson, and I am the Out-of-Home Care and Youth Program Manager for the Child Welfare Information Gateway and the Project Coordinator for the NRC for In-Home Services. On the behalf of the NRC for In-Home Services, we welcome you to today's webinar, the Family Development Matrix for In-Home Services. Before we get started, our operator, Deanna, will cover the logistics of today's webinar. Deanna?
Thanks, Cynthia. I will explain a few of the audio and video capabilities for this webinar. We will leave time at the end of the presentation for questions. There are two ways you can ask a question. In the control panel at the top right corner of your screen, there is a feature that allows you to raise your hand if you want to be recognized or type in a question in the chat box. Feel free to use those features at any time. To ask a question over the phone lines, you may press *1 at any time. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the NRC In-Home Services website. If we do not get to your question, a question and answer document will be developed and posted on the NRC's website along with today's PowerPoint presentation. Now I will turn the meeting over to Brad Richardson, Research Director at the National Resource Center. Brad?
Hello, this is Brad Richardson. I am Research Director at National Resource Center for Family-Centered Practice located at the University of Iowa School of Social Work. It is a collaboration among our National Resource Center for Family-Centered Practice in Iowa, the National Indian Child Welfare Association in Portland, Oregon, and ICF International headquartered in the Washington, D.C. area. The NRC for In-Home Services is one of 10 national resource centers that make up the Children's Bureau's Training and Technical Assistance Network and serves as a national center of expertise on child welfare services to ensure the safety and well-being of children and youth in their homes, prevent their initial placement or reentry into foster care, and preserve, support, and stabilize families. Our interest in this model is primarily from our work with the presenters and others on the Family Development Matrix model since the 90s. And I've been very interested in the model as a strengths-based case management tool that helps track outcomes and facilitates engagement with families in helping to provide supports. From a research point of view, we're also interested in moving FDM to a standing as an evidence-based practice. So as we go through this, keep in mind that FDM is a tool which helps agencies, workers, and families track improvement with a focus on family outcomes. So today we have three presenters who will highlight how a state child welfare agency is using the Family Development Matrix, particularly in the context of differential response. Our first presenter is Jerry Andres. Jerry is the developer of the Matrix Outcomes Model and is also director of the FDM project for the California Department of Social Services Office of Child Abuse Prevention. Jerry has successfully implemented the Matrix model with 140 family support programs and 23 collaboratives with child welfare and community-based agencies in California and numerous other programs, projects across the United States. We also have Judy Sherman. Judy is a project manager for Strategies, which is a California statewide nonprofit supported by the California Department of Social Services, Office of Child Abuse Prevention. Judy works with Jerry to implement the Matrix Outcomes model in California. In the late 90s, she was Associate Director of a thriving Family Resource Center in Santa Cruz County, which with 9 network partners developed and administered the Family Development Matrix with families. And then we also have Sarah Rock, who is new to the Office of Child Abuse Prevention, but has spent 20 years working with families and systems to protect children. Due to her experience of going to court with clients who experience extreme abuse and neglect, she started a family resource center with the belief that as a society we must invest in prevention. And as executive director of the Family Resource Center, she developed and implemented the Family Development Matrix and administered the first differential response system and offered multiple parent engagement programs for families. So we will begin with Jerry Andres talking about the Matrix Outcomes model. Jerry?
Thank you, Brad. We've been working with the National Resource Center for the last 15 years, and appreciate the National Resource Center for In-Home Services sponsoring this webinar. First slide, please. I want to give you a sense of the scope of our project. In 2009, the Office of Child Abuse Prevention began working with us to establish a statewide effort to track family progress in partnerships between child welfare and their Family Resource Center partners. And we started with 12 county-based collaboratives. In the last 4 years, we've grown to 23 collaboratives and, as Brad mentioned, 140 agencies. And you can see the spread of the various counties. But I'll give you an example of some of the types of programs that we're working with. For example, in Fresno County, which has got one of the highest poverty rates in California, we're working with the West Fresno Collaborative because, and they're made up with a variety of programs. All of them do some form of differential response with child welfare referrals. But just to give you an idea of the different types of agencies, there's a comprehensive youth center that's based in a family resource center, a cultural broker family advocate program, the Hope Lutheran Church, the Pediatric Brain Injury Foundation, the West Fresno Family Resource Center, and the West Side Family Preservation Services. So the way this works is that in all of these collaboratives is that these agencies get together with their child welfare partner, and we put together a design process where they focus on building a prevention plan, which I'll mention in a few minutes. But another example is the Yurok tribe, which is the largest tribe in California, and it uses the Family Development Matrix in 3 of its departments. Its TANF department, its Social Services department, and its Indian Child Welfare department. So they've used the FDM to better coordinate across those departments because they're seeing similar families and oftentimes the same families in different points in time. And they want to be able to share the data on family progress across their workers in the various departments. We also have some collaboratives that only have 1 or 2 agencies. For example, in Northern California, we have a faith-based organization, the Northern Valley Catholic Social Services. And in Los Angeles, we have a large Head Start program in South Central LA, around the Watts area, with 18 sites and 1,200 families. So they range from very large to urban and rural, a multidisciplinary approach. And I think a lot of it's in response to the changes that are taking place in terms of building collaboratives so that families can be better served in a timely way without and having shared information going across agencies. Next slide. Our project goals are funded by the Office of Child Abuse Prevention to build capacity with these centers and to use an integrated family tool for planning, assessment, and evaluation. And then, of course, to support these partnerships and for shared outcomes for families, making it, again, more efficient for families to access services both in terms of the child welfare system as well as the community-based system. And thirdly, as Brad mentioned, to conduct research and provide a framework of information for a pathway to prevent child abuse and to keep children in stable and nurturing homes. Next slide. So it's based on 2 important principles, that outcomes are an important element in family-centered practice. They raise expectations for goal achievement. And I'll give you an example from our workshop yesterday in Fresno, where one of the family workers said that starting with family strengths leads to better outcomes because it helps change attitudes and the willingness to be engaged by the family. So that if families know the outcome in which they're trying to achieve, and they have the support of the family worker, we're in a much stronger position to achieve that outcome in a more timely basis. The outcome also answers the question around data. What difference did the services delivered to the family make? And that's a lot different than just reporting through evaluation on the types of services provided, the numbers of clients. It really focuses on where did the family start when they engaged with the agency, and where have they moved during that engagement, and what types of interventions and services have been provided to that family that they've taken advantage of, and what has been the family's engagement in that process and resulting in what types of outcomes. Next slide. So the tool is an evaluation tool for measuring change with 20 outcome indicators, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And we use a facilitated process to design those outcome indicators, to train the staff to record their ongoing assessments in an internet database. We guide and track their management activities, and we also manage the data using a common database, which we use a national server for. But more importantly than the data in all senses is it's a method to support family strength building relationships. And we really are attempting to shift the paradigm here to, instead of having workers lead families through only a risk assessment and then focusing only on the risks, to also build a strength building relationship so that families can utilize their own resources in their own development. So we start off, as I said earlier, designing a community-directed prevention process, which is really designed to build collaboration across these diversity of agencies, both public and private. So we will start out with building a philosophy, a common philosophy, their goals and outcome indicators. We use the 20 consistently, but they can add additional indicators that they want to look at, given the diversity of their programs. We look at the intervention plan, which was developed through OCAP funding in 2004. It's called the Pathway to Prevent Child Abuse and Neglect. And it was developed at Harvard University by Elizabeth Shore and her colleagues, looking at best practices across the country. And we've integrated those practices into the database so that all these agencies have access to them. And they also developed some of their own custom interventions. For example, San Francisco has a set of 24 interventions that they want their 16 agencies who are using the FDM to be able to track across the county, and being able to show in different districts, which is very multicultural, to be able to see the impacts of those interventions. But we also realize that putting together any kind of collaborative effort is going to create challenges and obstacles. So we focus on that and try and normalize that. And we use, once that's defined, we bring together the teams to set some priorities and build an action plan to overcome those obstacles. And then we begin, only then do we begin the training of staff and beginning the evaluation of the interventions. Next slide. Here's an example of Humboldt County's prevention plan. At the very top, they have a county philosophy for preventing child abuse and neglect, which is based on their mission and their vision, and the values and principles and beliefs which they ascribe to. And then they identify the obstacles and meeting challenges to move that vision forward as a collaborative. And they build together their short-term objectives and an action plan which carries them through the first year or two. Next slide. By the way, all those 23 prevention plans and 140 agency showcases describing their programs and their contact information are located on our website. And the website is located in a slide near the end of this webinar. Our theory of change is really based around this relationship that we talked about, and that is with the family. And it's all about family participation, following through on what we call the empowerment plan, which people have traditionally called the services plan. Although you'll see in a few minutes when Judy Sherman's talking about the empowerment plan, how that is, we really focus on clarifying roles of both the family and the worker, and overcoming barriers and levels of support. We'll provide you some data on that. But we also have integrated those pathway interventions, and we track the workers' case management activities. We believe that the outcome of evaluation is really around that relationship. And here is the matrix table. It describes on the very left column, going vertically, the various 5 protective factor goals. And we've aligned the pathway to prevent child abuse and neglect goals with them. So for example, the first one is children's social and emotional development is a protective factor goal, and the pathway goal is the children and youth are nurtured, safe, and engaged. And next to that, going to the right, are the FDM categories that we're looking at. We understand we can't track everything, and so we've identified these core indicators based on data analysis and some national work that we've done in terms of research. So we focus on child safety and children's physical and emotional health. And the indicators that we've chosen to work with across California are 5. Child care, family supervision, the risk of emotional and sexual abuse, nutrition, and children's appropriate development. And then finally, on the right-hand side are the pathway interventions that are related to these indicators and aligned to them in the database, so that we want to confirm the safety of children, work in partnership with child welfare to connect to child care opportunities, identify developmental concerns, support children's social and emotional competence, support family advocates for children in school. So each of the goals for the protective factor and the pathway goals have this format. And so we look at child safety, children's physical and mental health, parent-child relationships, family communication, people's basic needs or shelter, access to services, substance abuse issues, emotional well-being and life value, and social emotional health. So that gives you a quick orientation. Of course, this is all on our website. You can take a look at these slides on the National Resource Center's webinar page. Next slide. I'm going to introduce Judy Sherman. Judy is our partner from Strategies, which is a statewide training and technical assistance program and is also funded by the Office of Child Abuse Prevention. Judy?
Judy, please depress your mute function.
Judy Sherman?
And again, Judy, please depress your mute function. We are unable to hear you.
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. I'm sorry. It wasn't cueing me. So good day, everyone. In the next few slides, I'm going to cover how the Family Development Matrix assessment and case management process are used to engage the family by inviting them into the conversation and using the family's perspectives, their abilities, and their past experiences to affect long-term change in their situation. So in using the Family Development Matrix, family support workers shift, as Jerry mentioned, make a shift from seeing the family as only being people in need to individuals who have something to contribute to the change process. So the Family Development Matrix tool itself is built on the principles of family support practice. And I'm sure, as many of you know, the principles of family support practice were developed to create a foundation for relationships between family support workers and agencies,
their partners, and their families based on mutual respect and accountability. So the matrix reflects those principles as it positions the worker to engage the family through a strengths-based and family-driven case management and assessment process. Next slide, please. So the assessment itself is a conversation between the worker and the family to explore not only the issues for change, but as Jerry's mentioned, what strengths the family brings to the situation. And I think we're going to mention the strengths a lot because it really is the major shift in this comprehensive assessment where the focus is on helping families to see how they've managed other situations, other difficult situations, and then using that as information for the family and the worker together to do problem solving, set goals, and inform their direction. So this working from strengths shifts the conversation from only looking at what's wrong. It's not a risk-based assessment. It's not an assessment that the worker does on the family or the family does as a self-assessment, but they do it together, and it's explored together how the family has gained the strengths that they've gained. So what have you done in the past that got you to where you are today? And then how can we use those things to inform current goals and problem solving? So as the worker reflects these strengths from the family, they become engaged in assessing their own situation, and it really draws the family out into the conversation. I know that for me, when somebody acknowledges that I have a strength in something, I'm interested to think about that and see how I can utilize that in other situations. And also, it tells me that that person is really seeing me and seeing who I am. And what we're hearing from workers who do reflect strengths back to the family and really use their listening as a way to acknowledge the family as a person who has values and interests and not just needs, that trust is developed. And that trust facilitates disclosure by families about their situation in a much less threatening way. So next slide, please. So through an inquiry process, the family is encouraged to tell their story about their situation, and then the worker learns about what's important to them. They conduct the assessment together, as I mentioned, and often workers will use the assessment as an opportunity for educating about safety or quality parenting practice or community resources, for example. Jerry mentioned we were in Fresno County yesterday. The day before that, we were in another county in California, and a couple of weeks ago, we were in Los Angeles with the Head Start group there. And we've been asking people about what works in their practice, what they're struggling with, so we can give them some support, and also what they're learning about their families in terms of strengths. And one worker said, well, sometimes the family doesn't know what they don't know, and told us that she uses the assessment to teach about tough subjects like sexual abuse. She's a parent educator as well, and rather than asking a direct question to the family, she points out that behaviors that the family might think about as play are really behaviors that could be harmful to the child, and then opens up the conversation with the family to address what the family might be interested in focusing on given this new information. So it's a very interactive tool and doesn't just stay focused on the questions about are you doing this or are you doing that or what's your situation, but allows this broader opportunity for learning and engagement. Next slide, please. So the family support workers find that the tool is valuable in this way, and as I said, we've heard a lot about them to engage families in a deeper way and involve them in overcoming obstacles and in problem solving. And in this way, the worker's role changes a little bit, and they become more of a facilitator and a support person than the person that's going to fix the problem or identify the problem and then tell the family what they should be doing. We encourage workers to practice with each other or use case studies when they're first learning about how to use the tool, because we do recognize that this is a shift in practice. And this practice, this opportunity to practice, creates a familiarity for the worker with the outcome. So we believe that it's a real key to success. And when we do the training, we really encourage practice, 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 and make suggestions to the collaboratives as a group together or the individual agencies as a group to integrate conversation about how their practice is going with the matrix in every staff meeting for a little while, and share case studies to each other, and so that they are able to kind of free themselves from having to depend on the actual assessment, and they can, again, engage the family in a conversational way as opposed to having to have the paper pencil out in front of them all the time and following along on the questionnaire. Next slide, please. So each indicator in the 20 indicators that Jerry mentioned is defined by these 4 status level indicators that help objectify the scoring. So, for example, in crisis describes a situation where immediate intervention is required. At risk means that the immediacy is reduced, but the situation hasn't been ameliorated, nor is there a plan in place. Stable means that a plan has been put into place and the family's starting to work towards their goals. And safe and self-sufficient means that the family is in a situation where they're working consistently and the situation has become dependable. So, for example, in the indicator for transportation, in crisis would mean that no transportation is available even in an emergency. At risk means that the family has no access to transportation to satisfy basic needs that they can in an emergency. Stable means that they have limited access when needed, and safe and self-sufficient would be that their transportation is consistent and dependable no matter whether it's public or private or whatever. So the tool itself doesn't have the labels on it because people never want to be in crisis, but it does have these descriptors so that after the worker and the family have had some conversation, the worker can actually speak with the family and say, well, it sounds like what you said to me was that you don't have any transportation to get to the store or the doctor or whatever, so let's mark this box. Or the worker might say, it seems to me that it sounded like what you said was you're between this one and this one. Which one is more likely reflects your situation in your mind? So next slide, please. So after the assessment is completed, the visit summary is generated automatically by the database system after the assessment is submitted. I like to call the matrix visit summary the jewel in the crown of the database system because it allows a quick view of strengths and concerns, and it's designed primarily to drive the conversation from strengths to concerns. And as I mentioned, the worker then with the family, imagine there's 20 indicators on this sheet that look like this. You can survey the sheet, notice which ones are in the blue or the green, which are safe and self-sufficient and stable, and start the conversation from there. Let's take a look at how you got there. Let's take a look at where your strengths are first, and then we can talk about the things that you want to focus on and use the information that you have about how you gained your strengths to apply to the problem solving and overcoming the obstacles in the areas of concern. Families, we've heard from workers that families take this and put it on their refrigerators, and that, they have 1 or 2 next to each other so it can show change. Even though we can create reports from the database system, this one, like I said, is simple and colorful, and people like the less words, more color, more design on it. So family workers like it for its simplicity and its appeal, and they'll print it off along with the empowerment plan and give it to the families to move forward. So it provides that balanced approach to be able to see both strengths and areas for concern and moves it beyond being just a risk assessment. Next slide, please. So the worker and the family together, as I mentioned, develop the empowerment plan. And as Jerry said, it's really kind of an action plan to establish goals that are broken down into manageable steps, addressing obstacles and barriers to manage change. Trust and accountability are enhanced when the worker and the family both commit to taking steps and identify when the follow-up will occur. We heard a lot of that yesterday in Fresno about how the steps in the empowerment plan need to include follow-up, and it really kind of seals the deal about who's going to do what and when they're going to check in with each other about how it went. So workers say that they use the tool to help focus families. In fact, one said we help focus wandering families, and to be a roadmap to goal achievement. So next slide, please. So this slide shows some of the data that we've collected on family engagement, defined as three things. So we define in family engagement as family participation, and that's follow through on the empowerment plan. Family supports, which is the kinds of supports that families acquire as a result of their participation in the plan, and this really relates more to reduced isolation, and then how families approached barriers as they were working the plan. So this data is collected from the worker perspective, so we ask the workers to tell us this. It's not an agreement between the family and the worker, as is the family status data. We can use this information to see how families are doing and what impact engagement has on the change in status levels. So can we go to the next slide, please? This slide pulls out the supports in terms of what kinds of supports people gained over time, and it tells us that about 75% of families increase family, friend, or community supports as a result of using this comprehensive process of the assessment and the family empowerment plan. So we started collecting this data in 2009, and you can see it hasn't changed too much over time, and remains about the same for all the years as an average. And the next slide, please. So this slide has lots of stuff on it, when you get a copy of the PowerPoint, you'll be able to look more deeply at the data. But the indicators that we're tracking are down the left side, and the colored lines tell us about the different levels of participation by the family in the empowerment plan process. So in most cases, family participation in the empowerment plan is affecting the greatest change in almost all the indicators. So this means that families who take part in setting the goals and taking steps to achieve those goals overall are doing better. And the family empowerment plan, as I mentioned, includes steps by both the worker and the family that helps create that partnership, establishes accountability, and over time moves the responsibility for change to the family. So the worker supports the family rather than does the work for them, and becomes more like a coach than a doer. And a final point to that I want to make is that workers tell us that over time, using this process creates time in their case management practice, because both the family and the worker are active in participating in change. Over time, they end up doing less, and the family takes more responsibility. So it's really a positive situation for both. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jerry.
Okay, thank you, Judy. So you can see that just to summarize, the Family Development Matrix primarily creates through an assessment a capacity for engaging the family and building a family and worker relationship towards specific outcomes. Just to give you an example, the following slides I'm going to present really focus on continuation of this data. So you see in 2009, we started out with a little under 500 assessments and had 36 second assessments. So that's 3 months later. So our protocol is that the worker conducts the FDM assessment within the first 30 days or the first 3 visits, and does it quarterly thereafter for as long as the family is engaged. And as you can see over the years, the last 4 years, we're now over 13,000 families who have utilized the FDM, and close to 7,000 of those are in second assessments. So approximately 50% of them have had second assessments. Actually, 1,800 of them have had third assessments, and over 600 have been engaged for over a year with a fourth assessment. Next slide. So I want to focus a little bit on the differential response. You can see that here in California, we've divided into three paths: Path 1, Path 2, and Path 3. Path 3 are those, and non-DR. Non-DR are those families in these projects that are not connected or referred at that time by child welfare. So approximately 60% are non-child welfare referred. Remainder are connected to child welfare, either through the hotline on Path 1, Path 2 through the assessment that didn't meet the level of further child welfare involvement, but at the same time a referral to a family resource center for an at-risk family. And Path 3 are those families where a case has been opened, but they're asking the family resource center or project to work with the family in concert with child welfare. I just want to give you a quick example, because one of the questions that come up often is, well, how well do the child welfare referred clients or families do in relationship to the non-child welfare families who come through these same programs? Well, there's a very interesting analysis that we did on a large number of families combining both. And what we found that the child welfare families obviously had issues around emotional and sexual abuse, substance abuse, family communication issues. So about 75% of those families were in crisis or at risk around that area. The non-child welfare had about 85% of those families were in those areas on average. After 3 months, both groups achieved a 95 or higher percent outcome rate moving to stable and self-sufficient. That's a very interesting parallel process, meaning that both groups were subject to the same process, the same interventions, same assessment, and within 3 months, those child welfare referrals caught up to the non-child welfare families. Next slide. So, as Judy mentioned, these families come in with a lot of strengths. So you can see at the top that a high in terms of family supervision, nutrition, home environment, etc. On average, these families come in with a lot of strengths in terms of stable or self-sufficient. On the lower section, you can see employment is the most difficult, with half of the families either in crisis or at risk. Community resources knowledge, 65-70%, budgeting, support systems. And I want to emphasize those because on the next slide, you're going to see some of the changes. Next slide. So here's a change of the families who have had at least 2 assessments, and the percent of clients who are now at stable or self-sufficient level as from the first assessment to the second. You can see the jump in community resources knowledge, which was at the lower end of their strengths in the beginning, but now at around 90%. The same way with budgeting and the same way with support system. The only lagger of those top 4 is employment. And you can see that employment, where it came in at 50%, is now up to 60%. So that is the one indicator that doesn't move up proportionally to all the other 19 indicators, which we've done some statistical analysis around, which has come out with that basically that these changes are not by chance. So finally, the changes of families who are stable and self-sufficient who started in at risk or in crisis in the first assessment, you can see that 80% of the families who are in crisis or at risk in community resources knowledge, and this is what we find, that families who are in crisis or having difficulty in the community isolate themselves. We all know that, and by getting reconnected to a service agency that's supportive, they get more information and connection around resource knowledge. We believe that these other indicators also rise because of that one event, because of that connection to community resources. These other outcome indicators also are attached to that. And so through family engagement and that connection by the worker, we get these changes. Next slide. So I just want to mention that, for isolate a couple on child safety, families who scored in crisis or at risk when they first were engaged, about 19% there was no change. About 10% were at risk and moved to in crisis. On the other hand, 71% of them increased their positive outcomes. And you can see 25% increased by one level, 32% by two levels, and 14% by all three levels. Next slide. And the same way with parent-child relationships, the same level. If I would have showed you all of the indicators and showed you these slides on all the indicators, you would see the same proportionality except for employment, which we don't have a whole lot of control over those variables. Okay, next slide. So finally, we provide ongoing support to all these 140 programs, and we do training and technical assistance, like Judy was saying, in Fresno yesterday. We have conference calls, webinars. We do database trainings that way. We bring the coordinators together for regional workshops. One thing I didn't mention is that as part of our collaborative process, every one of these collaboratives has a collaborative coordinator, and every one of the agencies has an FDM coordinator. That group forms the design team. That's the group we work with. That's the group who organizes their staff. That's the group who continues the FDM going on in these communities. That's the group that organizes the trainings. So we have a collaborative design group that we work with through planning, implementation, and follow-up. And we also participate in the Office of Child Abuse statewide conferences that share information. And we're real happy to share information with you today. Next slide. So there's some contact information and for Judy and myself. Next slide. I'd like to introduce Sarah Rock and Laura Martinez from the Office of Child Abuse Prevention in the state of California.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Sarah Rock, and I think that I'm going to try to keep this brief because most people really want to hear about the model. But from the state perspective, we're honored to be asked to kind of share our viewpoint of the model and also why we support and invest in it. Next slide, please. So we think as a state that it's our responsibility to invest in and support prevention because it's a little bit of a leap of faith. And FDM is a great way to focus on the families that are very upriver or upriver where we would like to be able to be, and engages and supports them to prevent their entering the CWS system. In order to ensure that these efforts are successful, OCAP wants to invest in strategies that work. And to show that they work, we have to be able to demonstrate, especially as a state, that they're effective. And we need to use data to do that. By investing in FDM, then we're supporting the development of a tool that is going to help us get to measurable outcomes in prevention. And we can start, or we can help convince people that it's worth investing in. Next slide, please. We use, in case people want to get technical, we use 2 different funding streams to support funding the FDM project, including Jerry and Judy, which are a package in being successful in delivering it, developing and delivering it. We use captive Title I and State Children's Trust Fund dollars. I think all of you are familiar with those. So there really are 3 basic reasons that we support FDM. It provides a tool to the communities and families who are best situated to do the family strengths work. It supports the data collection that we need that I mentioned, and by collecting this, people who don't prioritize prevention may recognize the benefit of doing so and have something of a paradigm shift, as Jerry talked about. Next slide. So the FDM collaborative that Jerry and Judy have talked about, and that is supported by OCAP, does several things. It supports, broadens, and extends the existing public-private partnerships to standardize and measure prevention. So our goal, I think, at OCAP is to help work towards targeted outcomes and accruing enough data to make a case that it works across the board or can be applied in many communities. This collaborative provides a way for entities to come together and plan for prevention, focusing on family strengths and allowing for out-of-the-box solutions where people can learn from each other and consider things that may not be things one typically does, especially coming from the child welfare arena. And then finally, the FDM collaborative works as a group to emphasize the data and prevention work in general rather than just relying on feel-good results. And I'm working towards avoiding that statement that I always hear, which is, you know, we can't show that prevention works, so we don't need to work towards that. But we're very committed to showing that's not so, and the FDM tool is how we're doing that in one specific way. Next slide. We have some long-term plans for FDM, and I'm sure Jerry and Judy do too, but from the state perspective, we'd like to see, and Brad alluded to this in the very first few minutes, we want to see an opportunity to expand that evaluation component and link it to federal outcomes of well-being. We want to strengthen the validity of it as an agency information system, and a panel of experts will continue to work with the project to provide support regarding the correlation between the child abuse and neglect prevention measures. And we will be supporting FDM to move towards that best practice standard. We want to be able to promote FDM as a tool across the state and continue to support Jerry and Judy in that network building to, as I said, build these targeted outcomes. And then finally, we want to be able to work towards sustainability of the tool and plan for the growth of it, depending on, you know, because it seems to be reaching sort of a critical mass and exponential growth, and we want to be able to have that be sustained into the future because of the investment of time and funding in the model and by communities. Next slide. So we have a couple of program folks on this who are available to answer any questions that folks might have today after the webinar or at any other time, and that's Tracy Urban and Laura Martinez. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all.
Thank you, Sarah. We have reached our part of the presentation where we're able to take your questions. Our operator, Deanna, will give some instructions on how you can ask your question verbally. Deanna?
Yes, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question over the phone lines, you may do so by pressing the star key followed by the digit 1 on your telephone keypad. Please be aware that a voice prompt on your phone line will indicate when your line has been opened. Again, that is star 1 for questions.
Thanks, Deanna. And while we're waiting for folks to get queued up, I do have a question that came in through chat. And the question is, do you engage with university partnerships either in research on this model or engaging faculty and field educators of future social workers in this model?
This is Jerry. Actually, the FDM was located at the California State University in Monterey Bay when I was the director of the Institute for Community Collaborative Studies and on the faculty. And so we also utilize faculty there for evaluation, and we had a community panel, community-based panel that helped originate the project back in 1997. So that university community partnership piece has been an ongoing process since 1997 all the way through to 2010. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Jerry. We actually have another question that's kind of similar. This question is, will this matrix work out of state?
Could you repeat the question?
Can this matrix work out of state?
It's currently working in over 200 programs outside of California. For example, all the Head Start programs in Nevada, in Toledo, Ohio, all of the United Way funded programs. In New Jersey, 5 pilot programs of family success centers with their child welfare, Department of Children and Families. In Florida, there are 3 programs that exist there. One is in Little Havana, where there are 8 neighborhood resource centers who are using the FDM, and the list goes on and on.
Thanks, Jerry. Deanna, do we have any questions over the phone?
Not at this time, but again, that is *1 for questions.
Okay, well, we do have another question that came in through chat, so *1 whenever you're ready to ask a question verbally, but I'll go ahead and continue with the chat questions. And the next question is, does this model track weekly services or allow for any ongoing tracking of services fidelity to relate them to outcomes?
I would say the answer to that is limited, because we track the services that are geared around the pathway to prevent child abuse and neglect, as I mentioned, but each agency, as well as each collaborative, can enter their own intervention and services into the database, so that when a particular indicator is identified as something that the family wants to work on, those specific local services and interventions show up into the database, and they can be selected and tracked. So the database is designed so that statewide we have a set of interventions that we track, and then at the local level they can track their own interventions and services. However, what it does not do, it does not track what you might consider to be all of the widgets and all of the time sequences and everything else that one might want to program to meet the needs of a specific funder. What we do in those cases, when many of the agencies have their funders requiring different reporting requirements, what we do then is that we download the data to them, and then they can integrate the FDM data as a specific measure into their database, whether it's an access database or some other, or a vendor database that's been programmed. That way they can integrate or manipulate the data. And every agency can now download their own data in that format.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jerry. This next question kind of goes into that, and that is, what is the learning curve like for staff that actually use the tool? What is the expected time frame for the staff to feel comfortable with the tool and using it effectively?
That's a great question, because as you know, anytime you introduce a tracking system into any culture of an organization, small or large, there is going to be levels of resistance, there's going to be levels of learning, there's going to be all the other issues that are related, including the issues around technology. So what we did a study. We conducted a study of a large number of agencies in our project, and we built a control group of 20 agencies who were not in our project. And for a year, we tracked, through surveys, their responses to a number of questions, and basically I'll tell you what the results were. It was all around, what we found is that there was a progressive line going upward in terms of positive value by the workers and the coordinators for the FDM through the year 2010 into 2011. And the control group was going steadily down. They did not have the FDM. And it had to do, I think, with the questions. The question said, do you have an evaluation system that can track family outcomes? Number one. Two, are you able to report to your funders the effects of your work on working with families? And there are a couple other questions. We surmised that the reason the control group went down was because the funders, especially in the last few years, have become a bit more demanding in terms of seeking outcomes rather than just services for the families that are being served, particularly families who are at risk because of the investment costs. And so those folks with FDM actually got stronger. We also found out through that study that it takes approximately 8 months from the time that they begin to the point in that timeline where they achieve the highest value of appreciation for the use of the FDM. So it's a growth factor that takes place over 8 months. And I'll give you a quick example. In Fresno yesterday, it was approximately 8 months ago, 8.5 months ago, that we began the project with them. We revisited them yesterday in a session, and the response was totally different than when we began. When we began, there was real questions about how they were going to utilize it because of the diversity of agencies, how they were going to share outcomes, et cetera, how they're going to work together. And yesterday, they were just right on top of it. They were teaching us new methods on how to collaborate, new ideas on how to work with families, and they were very enthusiastic because they could see that the process was working for them. So we think 8 months is a reasonable time frame.
Okay. Thanks, Jerry. Deanna, do we have any questions over the phone?
Not at this time.
Okay, Jerry, if you hold on just 1 second, we have 2 more questions, and they have to do with being able to use the tool with culturally diverse populations, and then also if the tool can be used in the private sector.
Okay, the private sector, I'm not sure what they mean, so I can't really respond to that.
Well, Jerry, just in regards to like California is a public child welfare agency, so I'm assuming this would be like maybe a nonprofit organization.
Most of the 140 agencies are all nonprofits. So yes, it is utilized by them. We have only one county, Alpine County, who the Child Welfare Department uses it because they have their own assessment tools. And so based on their risk analysis and their other assessment tools, they then refer the families to the Family Resource Centers, which are nonprofits, and the nonprofits are the ones who use the FDM. What was the second question? I'm sorry.
It has to do with being able to use the tool with culturally diverse families or environments.
They're all culturally diverse. Most of the families, we have a 65% Hispanic proportion for 60% of our families are Hispanic, 14% are African American, 3% are Native American, 2% are Asian American, and so I think there's about 18% white.
Okay, and there is another question that is coming in, and that is, how is the assessment by worker of family participation, such as supports, follow-through, barriers, incorporated into the overall assessment?
I'm going to ask Judy to respond to that because that's an area she covered.
Well, the process is a comprehensive process that begins with a conversation with the family, and that leads to the family and the worker together conducting the assessment. And then as a result of the assessment, they create the family or the visit summary that I showed you, the colorful page, and then they use that to identify family strengths and also the areas for focus for goal setting. And then they take those the conversation around the goals and transfer that information to the family empowerment plan, and then take the steps to help support the family to articulate the goal from their perspective, and then work together to identify the steps that the family will take and then the worker will take to achieve that goal, and then how they're going to do follow-up and whatever resources and referrals are made as a result of that. So it's what you start with the conversation and end with a conversation, and in between the assessment is conducted, the visit summary is produced, and then the family empowerment plans developed based on the strengths and areas for concern.
Okay, thanks, Judy. Deanna, do we have any questions over the phone?
We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay, you guys are loving this chat feature because I have two more coming through chat. And the question has to do with the tool again, and the question is, do you use standardized assessment instruments to assess the indicators? If not, have these assessments been validated?
That's a good question as well, and I'm going to ask Brad to add to my comment. We've been very careful to establish, to focus on validity and reliability on these indicators. They've been not only tested in the field, but they've also been tested for inter-rater reliability through case studies. And actually, Brad Richardson helped assist us in that process. Brad, can you add more to that?
Sure. Well, there is a document. I think it's on the Matrix Outcomes Model website. I think it's on our website as well, that goes through the reliability testing that we did for Packard Foundation back in about '99. And so the reliability has been established. What we're looking at doing now is using one site to try to compare change or thresholds of the family development matrix in correlation with the child welfare information contained in the state's child welfare information system, so that we can look at some of the federal safety, permanency, and well-being outcomes and how they correspond to the family development matrix measures.
Okay, thank you, Brad. I think there's a follow-up question to that, and like we talked about, like you just said, you know, we have some slides that also go over some resources towards the end, so being able to access the tool will be available in just a couple slides here. And I have one last question, and then we can go ahead and move on through our presentation. And the question is, if there's a licensed independent social worker who's working with families in the private practice, can this tool be utilized to assist with the success of children remaining safely in the home?
We haven't had that experience, so I don't know how to respond. The tool is standard. It's structured in the database, and it is structured. The way that we work with entities who want to design their own indicators is that we go through a process to do so, and then they're given an account, and they proceed on their own utilizing the internet database. So the answer may be yes, but at the same time, we haven't had that experience.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Deanna, do we have any questions queued up on the phone?
Not at this time.
Okay, so this concludes the question and answer portion of the webinar, so we're just going to go ahead and move on.
This is Lisa Diano, the project director of the NRC for In-Home. And Cynthia, if you don't mind, I want to just ask Jerry a couple more clarifying questions on follow-ups from the audience questions. One, Jerry, the question about culturally diverse populations. My understanding is that there are some tribes that are using the tool within their tribes?
Yes, there are. We actually brought all the tribes together that we're working with and conducted a 2-day workshop to identify tribal-specific indicators that range everything from community focus to relationship with tribal understandings and history, as well as legacies, as well as family focus. And those indicators are utilized by the tribes as additional indicators to the 20.
Great, thank you. And the other question, I know one of the first questions was whether your model allows agencies to look at correlations between services offered families and their progress on the indicators. I think that's how I understood the question. And I wasn't sure if that was as clear as possible. Could you talk a little bit about that?
So the question more specifically is about tying services and to the indicators.
Yeah, could you match the services offered to a group of folks and see whether you think that a certain kind of services or a certain kind of intervention, say one of the pathway interventions that you identified, is related to any changes in outcomes?
One of the, we can do that with the data in terms of which interventions are associated with change. Mm-hmm. What we cannot do up until this point is make a causal statement about that.
Right, good.
Because there are other variables involved besides the service. And so what we are doing to move in that much more, closely associated direction is creating a report right now that ties interventions, outcomes, and family engagement together. And so once agencies and collaboratives are able, and we provide collaborative reports twice a year to every collaborative on these areas separately, but now they'll be able to combine these reports themselves at their own discretion, and that will provide them information about which interventions are being utilized most often around which indicators and what type of results they're getting.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much. All right, Cynthia, if you want to advance. So I wanted to just let you know a little bit about the services offered by the National Resource Center for In-Home Services. As we mentioned, we are a service of the Children's Bureau, and we are able to provide free technical assistance to state and tribal systems and who are working to improve the capacity to maintain children safely in their homes. This slide talks about family engagement, but we also work on improving safety outcomes, improving the service array, a whole variety of areas related to keeping kids safe at home. And as many of you know, with the reauthorization of the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, and the states being asked to look more closely at differential response. We're doing quite a bit of work along with our partners, the National Research Center for Child, the Child Protection, National Center for Child Protection, to kind of give states everything they need to move forward on differential response. So the procedure for that is every state has a person designated to ask for technical assistance. And so if you aren't familiar with that, we can certainly help you. You can always contact us. We can answer any question you have about requesting technical assistance, again, to states or tribes. Counties can also go through their state to get that service. There's a process that goes through a federal regional office to have approval. We're working in a whole variety of states. I think we're in 13 right now, but we've worked in a number of states, and we would be happy to help you put together a request for assistance. We also do peer-to-peer learning. We support every state's Promoting Safe and Stable Families state administrators, as well as tribal state administrators for that program. We work with in-home managers. We can and we bring folks together through a variety of either webinars. We actually can facilitate bringing one state to another state, either virtually or in some cases, supporting travel for peer-to-peer learning. And we provide a whole variety of information resources. So I encourage you, you can see at the bottom of our slide is our website, and encourage you always to call any of us. There'll be a couple of contact information in the back of this presentation. Our home at the University of Iowa School of Social Work is called the National Resource Center for Family-Centered Practice. That can be a little bit confusing, but if you go to the websites listed here, you'll see, as Brad mentioned, Brad and Jerry actually have been working together on the matrix model for many years, and we do have some very good resources on our home website to be able to lead you to more of the information about the matrix model. And that then also here's some more resources, and that takes you to the matrix outcomes model, a website that Jerry has talked about that has so many rich resources. So I encourage everyone to poke around in there and see really good stuff. Before we close the webinar, as you know, it's always one of these situations where there's so many things we'd like to tell you about Family Development Matrix. We thought we'd like to do a little poll from those of you who are with us to ask you what you might like to see in the future. And so in just a second, Cynthia is going to pop a poll up. There you go. And I want to explain to you the choices. The first one is if whether you'd like to see a demonstration of the tool. And what we do is have a webinar where you would actually be sharing, Jerry would be sharing a screen or Judy be sharing a screen and show you as if you were working with a family, as if a worker were working with a family, how they would administer the tool. The second one would be to go much deeper into the research base for Family Development Matrix. There have been a number of studies over the years, mostly around evaluation and multiple analyses, and we would be happy to set up another time to share that. So if you wouldn't mind, we're going to open up that poll and just allow you a couple minutes or a minute maybe to vote if you'd like to hear more information about this topic.
Okay, at this point, about half of you have voted, so we're going to give another minute and go ahead and cast your vote. Okay, almost 70% of you have voted, so please go ahead and continue casting your vote. Okay, we're up to 75%. Quickly approaching 80.
We've been giggling about what happens if nobody wants to hear any more, but we're hoping that somebody will want to hear more. So.
Okay, we are at about 80%. We're going to go ahead and close the poll at this point, and here are our results.
Great, look at that. Okay. Well, that's really helpful. We're seeing 85% would like to see a demonstration, and almost half of you would like to hear more about the research base. So that gives us some good guidance about follow-up webinars. We really appreciate your interest. At this time, I want to just make sure and thank our presenters, Jerry Endres, Judy Sherman, Sarah Rock, and also, we didn't hear from her, but Laura Martinez was in the background in case there were some specific questions about what was happening in California. We want to thank all of you for your presentations. I want to thank you all for participating today with us, and let you know that we have recorded and will archive this webinar on the NRC for In-Home Services website. That's our web page. When you, Cynthia, will there be a PowerPoint sent out?
Yes, the PowerPoint presentation was sent out for registered participants, but it will also be posted on the NRC's website immediately after the webinar.
Okay, so if you load up your PowerPoint, then that's a hyperlink you can click into our website. So it takes us a little while to get that up, but we'll put that up on the web, so you'll have the recording, the PowerPoint, and we certainly would be very happy to hear more again from you. And we'll send out a notice. We'll send out a survey right following as soon as this closes out for you to give us information about what you thought about our webinar. And if you are interested in having more training or technical assistance from the in-home services, Brad's the best person to contact on this particular topic on Family Development Matrix, and he and I will make sure that your request gets to the right place. Again, thank you very much for your participation in this webinar. Cynthia, do you want to close us out?
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa. On the behalf of the NRC for In-Home Services, we want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar. If you have additional questions about the Family Development Matrix model or would like to learn more about training and technical assistance from the NRC for In-Home Services, the contact information for Brad Richardson is listed for your convenience. Immediately following today's webinar, we will send out a short online survey and hope that you will take a moment to provide us your feedback. We hope that you've learned something new today, and this concludes today's webinar. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Once again, this does conclude today's webinar. We thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect.